She'd learned it at 22, when her father's diagnosis arrived on a Tuesday morning like an uninvited guest that never left. Stage 2. Treatable. Expensive. The kind of word combination that sounds like hope until you look at the numbers. For 7 years, she had been the one doing the math. Every month, the same calculation: rent, utilities, groceries, medication, treatment. Every month, the same result: not enough. She worked as an administrative assistant at a mid-sized logistics company downtown. The salary was decent for someone without a graduate degree. It was insufficient for someone carrying 2 lives on one income. She had sold her car 18 months ago. She had moved to a smaller apartment the year before that. She had stopped buying coffee outside the house, stopped replacing clothes that still functioned, stopped doing the small things that made a person feel like more than a machine running on fumes. None of it was enough. The call from the clinic came on a Thursday afternoon while she was eating lunch at her desk. A sandwich she'd made at 6 in the morning because the break room microwave had been broken for 2 weeks and she refused to spend $4 on something she could prepare at home. Miss Collins. The voice on the other end was professional, careful. The voice of someone trained to deliver bad news without causing a scene. We've been trying to reach you regarding your father's account balance. Unfortunately, we're unable to schedule the next round of treatment until the outstanding amount is resolved. You have 72 hours before his slot is reallocated. She set the sandwich down. How much? She asked, even though she already knew. She had been watching the number grow for 3 months, paying what she could, hoping for something she couldn't name. The woman told her. Maya thanked her, hung up, and sat very still for a moment. Outside the window, the city moved like nothing had happened. Buses, people. The ordinary machinery of a Thursday in motion. She opened her laptop. She had tried everything reasonable already. The hospital assistance program had a 6-month waiting list. The loan she'd applied for had been denied. Her credit history was functional but thin, not enough collateral, not enough stability. She had asked her manager for an advance and received a sympathetic expression and a company policy printed on a sheet of paper. She typed into the search bar without fully deciding to. Housekeeper, live-in, immediate start, high compensation. She wasn't too proud to clean houses. She'd done it during college for 3 different families, and it had been honest work, physical, clear, finished at the end of the day. There was something she'd always respected about that, a task with a beginning and an end. The listing was 3rd from the top. Position: full-time residential housekeeper location, private residence, North Shore. Compensation $40s, $800 month plus room and board included. Start date, immediate requirements, discretion, punctuality, ability to work independently. She stared at the number, $4,800, plus housing, which meant her current rent, $1,200 a month, would become savings. In 2 months, she could clear the clinic balance entirely. In 4, she could establish a reserve. She clicked for more information. The address was in a neighborhood she'd driven past but never entered, the kind of street where the houses sat behind gates, and the gates sat behind trees, and the trees were trimmed by people who were paid specifically to make wealth look effortless. There was no company name, no employer listed, just an email address for inquiries and a single line at the bottom that she almost missed. Please note, previous applicants have withdrawn. Position requires comfort working in a quiet, private household. The employer values silence and does not engage in unnecessary conversation. She would have kept scrolling, except she'd already done the math again. She sent the email. The response came within 2 hours, which surprised her. A time, an address, a name she didn't recognize, and then did, 30 seconds after she typed it into a search engine. Kai Sion. She sat back in her chair. She had heard the name before, the way you hear certain names in a city, not directly, not in full sentences, but in pieces, in dropped voices. In the particular way people changed the subject. He was Korean American, born in Seoul, raised partly in Chicago, educated somewhere in Europe. His business interests were described in articles as diversified, which she had learned was a word journalists used when they couldn't get specifics. Real estate, private equity, logistics infrastructure, legitimate categories that nonetheless had a quality to them, a density like the outline of something larger that never fully came into focus. What the articles agreed on, he was worth more money than she would earn in 40 lifetimes. He had not given an interview in 11 years. He was known in professional circles as someone you did not want as an opponent. What people said outside the articles, he was cold, precise, capable of ending a business relationship or a career with the same emotional register he used to order lunch. 4 housekeepers in the past year, all departed quickly, no explanations given. What she found in a single forum thread that she probably shouldn't have read, he doesn't like women near him. Something happened a long time ago. Nobody knows what. Maya closed the laptop. She thought about her father, who was 61 years old and had never once in her memory complained about pain, and who called her every Sunday morning to ask about her week before she could ask about his. She thought about 72 hours. She opened the laptop again and confirmed the appointment. The gate was black iron, taller than she expected. A camera above the intercom. A speaker that crackled once before a voice, flat, neither welcoming nor hostile, said simply, "Collins." Not a question, a confirmation. "Yes," she said. The gate opened. The house was large without being ostentatious, which somehow made it more imposing. Stone exterior, clean lines, the architecture of someone who had nothing to prove. The garden was immaculate, not decorative, just ordered, as if disorder of any kind had been quietly prohibited. She was met at the door by a man in his 50s named Mr. Park, who introduced himself as the house manager and had the energy of someone who had worked for difficult people long enough to find peace with it. "Mr. Seon will see you in the study," he said, leading her through a foyer with floors the color of dark water. "A few things before you go in. He speaks when he has something to say. He will not ask how your day was. He will not explain his requests twice. If you have a question, you ask it once clearly. If you can't work under those conditions, it's better to say so now." Maya looked at him. "Does he bite?" Mr. Park blinked. Then carefully the corner of his mouth moved. "Not literally." "Then I'm fine," she said. The study was at the end of a corridor. The door was open. She noticed the room before she noticed him. Floor-to-ceiling shelves, a desk that occupied the center like a statement, the smell of coffee and something faintly woodsy that she couldn't name. Late afternoon light came through a narrow window and cut across the floor in a single clean line. Then she noticed him. He was standing at the window with his back to her, one hand resting on the frame, the other at his side. Dark suit, no tie, jacket pushed back slightly at the wrist. He was taller than she'd expected from photographs, broader, the kind of stillness about him that wasn't relaxed. It was controlled the way a body is still when it's paying attention to everything at once. He turned when she entered, unhurried, as if the timing was his choice. His face was composed in the way that certain faces are composed, not blankly, but with a deliberateness as though each expression was selected before being displayed. Sharp jaw, eyes so dark they absorbed rather than reflected the light. A scar along the left side of his jaw, thin and old, the kind that had long stopped telling its story to anyone. He looked at her for a moment. Not in a way that was rude, in a way that was thorough. "Sit," he said. One word. Not unkind, simply without decoration. She sat. He moved to the desk but didn't sit behind it, stood beside it instead, which she read immediately as intentional, not performing authority from behind a barrier, just standing, present. "You saw the listing," he said. "Yes. You know who I am. I looked you up after I got the address." Something shifted in his expression, barely. "Most applicants don't say that." "Most applicants probably think it's the wrong answer," Maya said. "I figured honesty would save time." He was quiet for a moment. Then, "The position is live-in. You'd have a room on the east wing, separate entrance, full use of the kitchen during off hours. The household runs on a schedule. I don't want it disrupted." "What does disrupted mean to you?" He looked at her. "Noise when I'm working. Conversations I didn't initiate. Doors left open in rooms that should be closed. The previous staff had difficulty with basic consistency." "I can be consistent." The pay is what the listing stated, non-negotiable. He paused. Do you have questions about the role? One, Maya said. The listing mentioned previous applicants withdrew. I'd like to know why, from you, not from a search engine. The silence that followed lasted long enough to have texture. They found the environment uncomfortable, he said finally. I work late. I don't make conversation. I have routines that I keep without exception. People who need warmth from an employer don't last here. I'm not looking for warmth, Maya said. I'm looking for work. He studied her for another moment. She held his gaze without effort, which seemed to register somewhere in him. A small adjustment, like a number revised. You can start Monday, he said. I can start tomorrow, Maya said. He said nothing for 3 seconds. Then, tomorrow. She moved in the next morning with 2 bags and a box. Mr. Park showed her the room, clean, simply furnished, with a window that faced a small courtyard where someone had planted lavender. She didn't know why that detail steadied her, but it did. The house had rules, and Maya learned them quickly. Breakfast was at 7:30. Kai Sion ate alone at the kitchen island, reading something on his tablet, and did not look up when she moved through the room to begin her work. The east and west corridor rooms were accessible. The north room, a single closed door at the end of the main hallway, was not. She didn't ask about it. The first week passed in near total silence. She cleaned, organized, maintained. She learned where things belonged and put them back precisely. She learned that he was particular about the kitchen, everything returned to its exact position, and about his desk, which she was permitted to dust, but not to rearrange. She learned that he was in the house more than she expected, working from the study on calls that she heard only as a low, steady voice behind a closed door, and that he had a habit of pausing at the bottom of the staircase in the evenings, as if deciding something, before turning and going back up. She did not make unnecessary conversation. She did not need to be told twice. What she did, on the 4th day, was place a small arrangement of flowers on the kitchen windowsill, 3 stems from the courtyard lavender, in a glass she'd found in the back of a cabinet. Not decorative, exactly. Just something living in a room that felt very still. She expected him to say something. He didn't. He sat at the island the next morning, and his eyes moved to the window once, briefly, and then back to his tablet. She counted that as acceptance. The second week, the silence began to have different qualities. She noticed that he noticed her. Not intrusively. He never looked at her the way men sometimes looked, assessing, measuring. It was more like a recalibration. She'd be moving through the hallway and become aware, without looking, that he had paused. Or she'd finish in the study and turn to find him in the doorway holding a coffee cup, not quite looking at her, but not quite not looking. One afternoon she was in the kitchen making herself a sandwich, her lunch, her time, when he came in and went to the coffee pot. She said nothing. He said nothing. The kitchen was large enough that they occupied it without being in each other's way. She was almost done when he said, without turning, "You hum." She stopped. "Sorry? When you work, you hum." He turned slightly, not fully facing her. "I'm not telling you to stop, I'm noting it." She looked at him. "Is it a problem?" He was quiet for a moment. "No," he said, as if he'd checked and confirmed it. Then he took his coffee and left. She stood there for a moment, sandwich in hand, and felt something she couldn't quite categorize. Not warmth, not victory. Something smaller and more specific. Like a door that had been shut opening 1 inch. The call from the clinic came again on a Wednesday evening, while Maya was in her room. She stepped outside into the courtyard to take it. She never took personal calls inside the house, a decision she'd made herself without being asked. The number had gone up, a supplementary charge. Equipment costs that hadn't been included in the original estimate. She sat on the low stone bench by the lavender and did the math again. The salary was helping, more than helping, but it wasn't there yet, not in time. She thanked the woman and hung up and sat for a moment in the dark, just breathing. Collins. She looked up. Kai Seon was standing in the doorway that led from the kitchen to the courtyard. He wasn't in a suit, dark trousers, a simple shirt, sleeves folded to the elbow. He looked like a slightly different person. Not softer, exactly. Less armored. "I didn't know you were here," she said. "I live here," he said, which was not unkind, just precise. "Right." She stood. "Sorry, I'll come back inside." "I wasn't asking you to move." He stepped out fully, stood at a distance that was polite, looked at the same courtyard she'd been looking at. "The lavender is from the original garden," he said after a moment. "It's been here longer than I have." She looked at him. He didn't look back. "My father used to grow mint on our balcony," she said, not knowing why she offered it. "He said any apartment felt bigger with something growing in it." A pause. "Is he alive?" Kai asked. "Yes." The word was both answer and armor. "He's managing." He didn't push. She noted that. Most people pushed, followed up with "what does that mean?" or "how serious?" or a string of well-meaning questions that made her feel like her private life was a story for other people's consumption. He just received the information and held it without demanding more. They stood in the courtyard for another minute, not speaking. Then he went inside. She stayed a moment longer, breathing the lavender, and thought about a door opening a second inch. The first conflict arrived at the end of the third week, from a direction she hadn't expected. His name was Daniel Cho, business associate, colleague or something adjacent to both. He arrived unannounced on a Friday morning while Kai was in a call, and Mr. Park showed him to the sitting room with the practiced calm of someone managing a situation he'd seen before. Maya was cleaning the hallway when Daniel Cho noticed her. He was charming in the immediate obvious way that some men are charming. Quick smile, easy posture, the kind of attention that felt like a spotlight before you realized it moved to everyone. "I don't think we've met," he said. "I work here," Maya said simply, and kept moving. "How long?" 3 weeks. He tilted his head, still smiling. "He must have changed his policy." She looked at him. "Sorry. Kai, he doesn't usually keep—" He seemed to edit himself. "He prefers a minimal household." "I'm aware," Maya said and moved on. She didn't think about the exchange until that evening, when she overheard, not eavesdropped, simply heard, because the study door was open an inch and she was passing, a piece of what Daniel was saying. "She's different from the others." A pause. "I'm just noting it." And then Kai's voice, quiet and final. "Note something else." Maya kept walking, but something in her chest registered the words with more attention than she'd intended. The misunderstanding happened in the 5th week, and it was the kind that happens not because either person lied, but because silence has multiple translations. She had been speaking with her father on the phone, a longer call than usual, because he'd had a difficult day, and she could hear it in his voice even when he insisted he was fine. She'd stayed on with him for an hour, sitting at the kitchen island, making him laugh by describing a crow she'd seen that morning, standing in the courtyard with the exact energy of a disappointed accountant. When she hung up, she turned and Kai was there. She hadn't heard him come in. He was holding a folder, and he'd clearly been standing there for a moment, long enough to have heard something, though she didn't know what. His expression was the closed one, the one she was starting to be able to read. Jaw set, eyes fixed on a neutral point just past her. "I didn't realize you were home," she said. "Finished early." His voice was flat. "I need the study reorganized before tomorrow. There are files on the desk." "Of course." She stood. "Keep personal calls to your room," he said. Not raised, not cruel, but different from his usual tone, sharper at the edge. She stopped. "I've kept all personal calls outside or in my room. That was the first time I was at the island. I'll make sure it doesn't happen again." He looked at her then. Something passed through his expression quickly, too quickly for her to read. "Fine," he said, and left. She stood in the kitchen for a moment. The warmth she'd been slowly, carefully building in her chest toward him cooled by a few degrees. Not gone, just cooled. She organized the study files with precision, placed everything exactly where it needed to be, and did not bring flowers to the kitchen window the next morning. He noticed. She knew because he stood at the island for a full minute before going to get his coffee, and his eyes moved once to the empty windowsill. She said nothing. He said nothing. But that afternoon, when she came into the kitchen to make tea, there were 3 stems of lavender from the courtyard sitting on the counter, uncut, as if someone had brought them in and then been uncertain what to do next. She looked at them for a moment, then she found the glass and put them in water. She learned about the north room by accident, the way most significant things happen, not through searching but through stillness. It was a Sunday, the house very quiet. Mr. Park was off. Kai was supposedly in the city. She was cleaning the upper hallway when she passed the closed door and heard faintly music. Not modern music, something older. A melody she didn't recognize played on a piano, delicate and unfinished sounding, as if it had been recorded mid-thought and never completed. She didn't open the door, didn't put her ear against it. She simply paused, heard it for 10 seconds and kept moving. But she thought about it all day. That evening she asked Mr. Park, carefully, without urgency, about the room. He was quiet for a moment, arranging something on the kitchen counter that didn't need arranging. "That room has been closed for 15 years, he said finally. She waited. "There was someone," he said. "Just that. And then, Mr. Sion handles it in his own way." She didn't ask more. She was starting to understand that some things in this house weren't withheld from her. They simply belonged to a grief too old and too deep to be explained in a hallway. But 15 years made sense now. The walls he maintained. The way he moved through rooms like someone who had decided long ago that getting close to things only made losing them worse. She thought about him differently after that. Not with pity. He would have rejected that immediately, and she knew it. With something closer to recognition. She understood, in her own way, what it was to organize your life around a loss, to make the math work around the whole. The dinner happened because of a storm. She hadn't planned it. It was a Thursday in November, and a system came through the city in the late afternoon that turned the windows white with rain and knocked the power out for 40 minutes. By the time it came back, it was dark and cold, and she had instinctively started cooking. Not for him. Just because cooking in a storm was what you did when you were Maya Collins, and your father had taught you that a warm kitchen was the smallest form of courage. She made soup. Simple, from what was in the refrigerator. She made enough for two without consciously deciding to. When she heard his footsteps in the hallway, she had a bowl ready. She put it on the island without comment and went back to her own. He stopped in the kitchen doorway. He looked at the bowl. He looked at her. "I made soup," she said. "The power was out for a while. I needed something warm." He came in, sat across from her, not at the far end where he usually sat, but at the same counter, with one empty stool between them. He ate. She ate. The storm moved through the windows outside. The kitchen was the warmest room in the house. After a while he said, "You cooked for your father." It wasn't a question. It was a conclusion. "Every Sunday," she said. "He taught me the basics. I took over when he couldn't stand long enough to manage it." A pause. The rain shifted. "He raised you alone?" Kai asked. "My mother left when I was 9. She said it without drama, because it had been long enough that the drama had finished. He worked 2 jobs for 6 years, so I could go to a school with a proper library. That's the kind of person he is." Kai was quiet. His hands were around the bowl, not because he needed warmth, she thought, but because it was something to hold. "What does he do?" he asked. "He was a high school history teacher," she said. 30 years. He knew every student's name. He went to graduations even when he wasn't invited. She paused. "He's good at caring about people, better than most." She hadn't meant to say that much. It came out anyway, the way things came out in kitchens during storms. Kai said nothing for a moment. Then, "He sounds like a man who deserved more than he got." The simplicity of it landed somewhere deep in her chest. "He'd say he got exactly what he deserved," Maya said. "He's stubborn that way." She looked up and found Kai watching her. Not with the usual measured assessment. Something else. Something quieter and for that reason more visible. He looked away first. They finished their soup. He washed his own bowl, she noted it because he never had before, and set it on the rack. "Thank you," he said at the door. "It was soup," she said. He almost smiled. Not quite, but almost. 2 weeks later, the rival arrived. Her name was Jisoo Han, and she was everything that made sense for a man like Kai Sion, polished, sharp, from a family with the right connections. She had history with him, the kind Maya could see in the way Jisoo moved through the house as if she owned portions of it. She came for a business meeting and stayed for dinner, which Kai had not told Maya about in advance. Maya discovered this at 4 o'clock, when Mr. Park quietly informed her that they'd need the dining room set for 2. She set it without comment. Jisoo was gracious to her in the way powerful women are sometimes gracious to the help. Perfectly polite, slightly elevated, her eyes moving over Maya with a brief cataloguing that was over before it began. During dinner, Maya stayed out of the room. She could hear the conversation. Professional, efficient, the vocabulary of people who spoke the language of acquisition and leverage. She couldn't hear the tone until she passed the door once to refill the water carafe. Jisoo's voice, "You should come to the foundation event in February. It would be good for you to be seen." Kai's voice, "I'll consider it." "You've been invisible for too long, Kai." A pause. People wonder about a man who doesn't appear. Maya moved away from the door before she heard more. That night, after Jisoo had gone, Maya was in the kitchen when Kai came in. He looked tired, not physically, but in the way people look tired after spending 2 hours being the version of themselves they don't prefer. She poured him a glass of water without being asked and set it on the counter. He looked at it, then at her. "How long has she known you?" Maya asked before she could edit herself. He considered the question. "We met 11 years ago. We have occasional business overlap." "She looks at you like it's more than that." The words came out even, informational. She was startled by her own precision. He picked up the water glass. "It was, once. A long time ago." He drank, set the glass down. "It became clear we wanted different things." "What did you want?" she asked. He was quiet for long enough that she thought he wouldn't answer. "Quiet," he said finally. "I wanted quiet." She understood that, more than he knew. "Good night," she said. "Good night, Collins." She was halfway down the hallway when she realized he had never, not once, used her first name. She had no idea why the absence of it suddenly felt significant in both directions. The confrontation between them came not with raised voices, but with one sentence, delivered at the foot of the stairs at 11 on a Thursday night. She had received confirmation that day that the clinic balance was cleared, the last payment processed, the next 3 months of treatment secured. She had sat in her room for 20 minutes after opening the email, not crying, just breathing, allowing herself to feel the particular loosening of something that had been locked in her chest for 2 years. She'd been in a lighter mood than usual all evening, humming louder than normal. She'd made herself pasta in the kitchen and left a portion in the refrigerator in case he was hungry, with a note that said only Thursday soup, except it's pasta, close enough. She found the note in the trash when she went to throw something away. She stood in front of the trash can for a moment. Then she picked the note back out, very deliberately, folded it, and put it in her pocket. A small act of refusal. She was heading upstairs when she heard his study door open. He appeared at the end of the hallway, saw her on the stairs, and stopped. He looked at her in a way that was different from the usual. There was something careful in it, something that didn't quite match the controlled expression. "You seemed lighter today," he said. She looked at him. "Good news about my father." He nodded once, slowly. "The treatment." She stopped. "How do you know about the treatment?" The silence had a different shape from his usual ones. This one was tighter. "Mr. Park mentioned your father was ill," he said. "Mr. Park doesn't know the details." She came down one step. "He wouldn't know about the treatment plan or the clinic." Kai said nothing. Something clicked. "You looked into it," she said. "Not an accusation, a recognition." "I made a call," he said. "Why?" He moved to the base of the stairs, not close, 2 steps away. His jaw was set in that way that meant something cost him. "Because you work in my house. I want to know if there are pressures that might affect your—" "That's not why," she said. The words weren't loud, but they were certain. He looked at her for a long moment. "No," he said. "It's not." The hallway was quiet around them. Somewhere outside, a wind moved through the lavender. "You cleared the balance," she said. She had suspected, but saying it made it real. The timing, the amount, the sudden processing, it hadn't been her paycheck. She'd been calculating for weeks. He didn't answer, which was its own answer. Kai. The name felt significant in her mouth, the first time she'd said it without the formality of Mr. Sion. Why? He looked at her hands, then at the wall, then at her. Because your father is the kind of man who deserves more than he got, he said, and you should not have to carry that alone. She didn't speak. She didn't trust herself to, in that moment. He was looking at her with the mask entirely down, not in a performance, not in a confession, just simply without it. She could see what was underneath, not weakness, something that had been protected for a very long time, kept in a closed room, played in private to no one. The room, she said softly, the one that's always closed. His expression changed, not closed down, changed. Something moved across it like weather. Her name was Soyeon, he said. His voice had dropped to a register she hadn't heard before. We were engaged. She died 15 years ago. Suddenly. In a way that He stopped, recalibrated. I wasn't there. I was in a meeting that I could have rescheduled, and she had a medical event that might have been survivable if someone had been home. The hallway held the words. I decided after that, he said, that proximity was a liability, that caring about someone only created a surface area for damage. He paused. I was consistent in that belief for a long time. Maya came down the last step until she was on the floor, same level as him, close enough that she could see the fine tension in his shoulders that he was too disciplined to release. You hid it well, she said. I had practice. The flowers on the counter, she said. The call to the clinic. Staying in the house more than you used to. She looked at him steadily. You haven't been consistent for a while. His jaw moved. His hands, at his sides, opened once and closed. No, he said. I haven't. I'm not Soyeon, Maya said. I'm not a replacement for something you lost. I'm a person who showed up with 2 bags and a box and put flowers on your windowsill without asking. She paused. And I think you know the difference. He looked at her with something she would later struggle to name, not relief, not love in its declared form, but something prior to both of those things, something that had been in a closed room, listening to music alone, waiting to be allowed back into the house. What would you need? He asked. His voice was careful, like a man who had forgotten how to ask. Honesty, she said. When things are hard, when you pull away, I need you to tell me why instead of going cold. He nodded slowly. And I need you to understand, she continued, that I didn't stay in this house because I had nowhere else to go. I stayed because of who I found here. Something in him shifted, completely, like a lock releasing. He reached out and touched her face, just with his fingertips along her jaw, the lightest possible contact. Not rushed, not claiming, just present. Maya, he said. Her first name. Finally. There it is, she said quietly. He almost smiled. Then, fully, he did. And it was the kind of smile that explained everything about why he kept it so rare. It changed his entire face. It made him look like someone who had, a long time ago, known how to be happy, and was cautiously remembering the shape of it. He kissed her with the same deliberateness he applied to everything, unhurried, intentional, one hand at her waist and one still at her jaw. She felt his heartbeat where her hand had found his chest, steady and fast at once. When they stepped back, they were quiet for a moment. The employment contract, she said. He raised an eyebrow. It needs to be addressed. I'm not interested in ambiguity about what I am in this house. He looked at her for a moment with that recalibrated expression. Then, I'll have Mr. Park process the termination of the contract Monday morning. And after that? She asked. After that, he said. You're here because you chose to be, not because of terms. She looked around the hallway, the dark floors, the closed door at the end, the particular quality of quiet that had felt like emptiness and now felt like something else. I'm going to suggest we open that room eventually, she said. He was quiet. Then, eventually. Not tonight, she said, but soon. He deserves to be remembered in a way that doesn't keep a door shut. He looked at her steadily, and the thing in his expression now had no name for it, except real. "I know," he said. That Sunday, her father called at 9 in the morning, as he always did. "You sound different," he said within the first 30 seconds, because he had always been able to hear things in her voice that she hadn't finished feeling yet. "Good different?" she asked. "Like someone who put something down she'd been carrying a long time," he said. "So yes. Good different." She was standing in the kitchen. The lavender was in the window. Outside, the courtyard was bright with late November light, thin and clear. Kai was at the island behind her, reading, coffee in hand. Present the way he had begun to be present, without announcement, without explanation, simply there. She looked out at the lavender and thought about her father growing mint on a balcony, about doors that opened 1 inch at a time, about the way a kitchen during a storm could contain everything that mattered. "Dad," she said, still here. "I want you to meet someone," she said, "when you're feeling up to it." A pause. She could hear him smiling. "Tell me about him," he said. Behind her, she heard Kai set down his coffee. She didn't turn, but she felt him still, the particular quality of his attention when something mattered, and he didn't want to miss it. "He's quiet," she said. "He's generous in ways he'd never admit to. He's been alone for a long time, and he's learning that he doesn't have to be." She paused. "And he has the worst resting expression of anyone I've ever met, but you get used to it." Her father laughed, a real one, full, the kind that meant his chest was good today. Kai's hand rested briefly at her shoulder as he passed to get more coffee. Just a moment. Just enough. She had come to this house to survive. She had found in the quietest and most unexpected way that survival and something much larger than it could occupy the same space. If you were willing to put flowers on a windowsill without asking permission and wait to see if anyone brought them in from the cold, he had. From the very first morning. He just hadn't known how to say so until she'd been patient enough to hear it.